Hi everyone, I am Milan and here you are watching the first episode of my network science tutorial video series. So if you are here, then you probably have seen some of my networks and you met my work at some point covering network science from visualization to Python-based analytics. And the main goal of this channel and this series of videos that are planned to arrive every week from now is to kind of pass on the core knowledge I gained during the past years in network science. So this will cover theoretical parts where we will go into the technical and theoretical and scientific details of networks, but this course will also cover a lot of practical things like how to visualize networks in Gephi and how to analyze networks in Python. So let's jump in and focus on the first part, which is about the introduction of network science. So let me just put myself here on the side, even smaller. And yeah, so the first topic we have is the introduction of network science and what network science is and why it's very cool and very important and very widespread. So especially if this nice software lets me do that, so we can jump into the history of network science. So even though networks and the term of networks and social networks have become particularly popular during the past like 10, 15, maybe 20 years, the history of network science goes back to the 18th century. In particular, there was a, let's say, common like puzzle or like brain teaser that the people of Konigsberg, a city back in Prussia, were very much fond of. So in the city of Konigsberg, there was one river that split the city into several parts. And between these several parts of the city, there were altogether 7 bridges linking the different parts of the city together. So far it looks like any major city which has a river and which has bridges. and the observation of the local people was that no matter how they cross the bridges, there is no way to make a walk, a round trip in the city in a way that they cross each and every bridge just once. So there was a problem which seems to be, well, probably a crucial one for urban planners and people working in transportation planning, but for the everyday people and even for tourists, this doesn't seem to make a huge difference. Nevertheless, this puzzle reached the ears of Leonhard Euler, the mathematics genius, and he got puzzled enough with it to invent a whole new branch of mathematics. So the way Euler started to solve this problem and figure out why it's not possible to do such a walk in Konigsberg, he started to lay out a mathematical construction, a mathematical theory, and the foundations of modern graph theory. So how did this happen and how did this prevail in the scientific realm? To have like a small survey or measurement on that, I went to the Google Books Engram viewer. So in case you haven't met this app yet, it's a very nice, very easy to use website. It belongs to Google now, and it is built upon a project called Google Books. In the Google Books project, they digitalized by now maybe around 40 million books, which is a substantial, for sure, double-digit percentage of the entire population of books ever printed, which is somewhere around like 100 million, if I remember correctly. And while disclosing these books can conflict with copyright issues, Google was able to publish thanks to a few, in particular 2 very persistent researchers, so that they managed to publish engrams and in this engram viewer, which means that we can search for engrams, meaning that 1 gram is 1 word, 2 grams are 2 words, 3 words are 3 grams. So we can search for these combinations or compounds of words or expressions, and we can see how many times these expressions were printed in books across the historical years, historical decades, and even centuries. So this is a nice website, you should check it out, and I will also share a book reading list at the end of this video, and you will find a very nice book on the topic of Google Engram Viewer. So what I did here is that I searched for graph theory, network science, and sociogram. So this graph shows that how many times these expressions were were mentioned in printed books during the past 200-300 years. You can see that graph theory is the first one, so that's thanks to Euler and how he studied the whole field. And then we see a huge peak in graph theory in the middle of the 20th century, which is partially thanks to Hungarian mathematicians like Paul Erdős and Alfred Rényi. So that's when this new emerging field of mathematics actually started to be a major one. However, you can see that there is a blue graph that kind of peaks 10, 15, maybe 20 years, even 20 years before graph theory, which is sociogram. So that's a very interesting one about networks, because network science is kind of rooted in three different domains. On the one hand, of course, in mathematics, and was slightly in urban planning, as it was an urban or city related issue that came up in Konigsberg. Then in social sciences, and finally in physics and computer science. So you can see here the sociogram emerging in the late 40s, early 50s, which was practically used to study schools and classes in schools and map out the ecosystems of children to figure out who are the ones that are left behind, whether there are any cliques being formed that could be harmful for the common good of the social society or these like smaller social structures. And once the blue one in social sciences was over, or not over, but kind of lost the hype and converged back to like a new level of normal popularity, network science came in the late 90s. This wave of network science was mostly fueled by data and also quantitative theorists like physicists, mathematicians, computer scientists, meeting theories and knowledge and of course people and researchers from social sciences. So this is the part where also my research came into the picture like 20 years later. This is the one where famous books like Linked were published, and also researchers like Albert László Barabási, Alexander Veszprémyányi, Duncan Watts, Stephen Strogatz, and a few others kind of kickstarted the whole field. And then many other applications came later on, whole research institutes who are researching networks, applications from Google search engine, such as PageRank, the PageRank algorithm, to all the recommendation systems using networks in the background. So network science and the history of networks kind of looks like this. And how it comes that networks are such a universal and such a trendy topic today? So on the one hand, the core structure of a network is still the very same that Euler proposed back in the day, which is kind of surprising because 300 years we would expect at least some major evolutions. But still, the networks or graphs look very much the same. So, in any proper decent network, there are two major components. There are nodes, and there are links. So nodes are these tiny bubbles that we usually mark or denote by these circles, these like spheres, and links are the lines, either straight or curved, connecting two nodes. So in a network is kind of a set of nodes connected by links or edges. So it's really simple, and the tricky part and also the interesting and cool part comes when we start to fill this backbone up with data. So that's when these networks come to life, because we can plug almost any kind of data into a backbone structure like this. For instance, we can build social networks where the nodes are people and the links are any kind of social relationships. That could be friendship relationships or family ties, co-working relationships, or whatever you can imagine. These nodes can also be like social media profiles or anything present in the online space. For example, on Instagram, who follows whom is a nice definition of nodes as profiles and links as following relationships. We can also talk about networks of cities, for example, being connected with different airlines or other ways of transportation. If we zoom into the cities, then it's just enough to think about the road network or the public transport network, which are again networks that can easily map into the structure of nodes being linked by some types of edges. And then the list could go on to, I don't know, for example, biology, where food chains are a great example, where one node is one species of animal, the other one is another species, and they are linked if one species eats the other one. But we can also do networks in biology on the level of cells. For example, our brain is a wonderful example for that because it consists of neurons which are linked by synaptic connections to the other ones. But we can even zoom into the body even further and study, for example, the molecular or gene interaction networks. For example, how gene segments interact with different proteins within the body. So this very simple, very generic tool leaves us quite a lot of space to explore networks, from historical or medieval studies to poetry or urban planning or biology or international trade, or I don't know, even to analyze terrorism or social media. So we have this very general structure which we can, and we will in this course later on, fill up with all sorts of data. And just to close down this first session, there are a few books that I highly recommend to read. You can find them on this link, on this bookshelf of mine on Goodreads. And keep an eye on it and keep checking it regularly, because I will keep adding new books as soon as I make some progress with all this reading list behind my back. So that was it for the first time. Thank you for joining and see you next week.